Okay, reminder, you need to know what negative exponents are. For example, 5 to the negative t means 1 over 5 to the t. There was a place on the first packet I gave you where I had a negative in this, and I would have written something like 1 over 5 to the negative t. That's not right. This is correct, and this is how you do it. So that, if you're making the table for x to the negative 2, you use x values, negative 2 through 2, the usual x values. F of x is x to the negative 2, so if x is negative 2, you have f of negative 2, which is negative 2 to the negative 2. And that, of course, is 1 over 2 squared, or 1/4. So this is how you would do f of x equals x to the negative 2 for x equals negative 2. Now, of course, I didn't emphasize it in class, but what is x to the negative 2? That's 1 over x squared. So we're getting a graph of x to the negative 2, which is 1 over x squared. Well, evaluating at negative 1, it's clear that we get 1. Student did ask that I write this out again for x equals negative 1/2. Well, okay, x is replaced by negative 1/2, so we're going to replace this x by negative 1/2. We're going to get negative 1/2 to the negative 2. And that's going to be 1 over, now I was a little careless, I didn't write the negative, it should have been negative 1/2 squared. That doesn't make any difference because squaring a negative, it's going to end up positive anyway, but I should have written the negative there because that's, of course, what negative 1/2 to the negative 2 means. And that's going to be 1 divided by 1/4, which is 1 division sign 1/4, which is 1 times 4 over 1, which is 4. I did point out, and it's on the assignments page in every place, if there's supplementary material on fractions, and I strongly recommend that everybody make sure they understand all of that material, because if you don't, there are plenty of places in this course, including here, but including much more advanced topics, that you're just going to be lost on. You want to understand what you're doing. You need to understand simple fractions according to those worksheets or those materials, so that you'll understand some of the other things that we do, and so that you can do this and understand these basic graphs. Okay. Now we also talked about why f of 0 would be undefined. We talked about the fact that if I want to count to 10, I can count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So 10 divided by 2 is whatever that is. That's 5, right? Okay, so there's 5. What's 10 divided by 1/2? We can count to 10 by 1/2. 1/2, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, running out of fingers. But you can count yourself and you'll see that you get 20. Okay, 1/2. To make up 10 from halves, you're going to need 20 of them. That's what division is. Now, the smaller the number you're dividing by, the more counting you're going to have to do. So, if you wanted to count to 10 by 0.1, you'd have to go 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, all the way up to 0.9 and then 0.1. You'd have 10 counts already by the time you got to 1. Then to get to 2, you'd need 10 more, 1.1, 1.2, up to 1.92. And then for every additional number, you're going to need 10 more. To count to 10 by 0.1, you got to count 100. Now, just because you can punch into your calculator 10 divided by 0.1 equals 100 doesn't mean you understand why 10 divided by 0.1 is 100. And just because you can write out with a division sign and do things, or just because you can do the reciprocal of a fraction and multiply, doesn't mean you understand what it means to divide. And if you don't take the time to understand what it means to divide, and very few people do, because calculators are put into your hands and you just bypass the whole process, then you won't understand what happens when you divide by numbers that approach 0, and you won't understand these graphs. Okay? Think about it. Can you count to 10 by zeros? If I count by zeros, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, 0, I'm not getting anywhere, and I never will. So 10 divided by 0, since you can't count to 10 by zeros, it's undefined. So if x is 0, x to the negative 2 would be 1 over 0 squared. 0 squared is 0, and 1 over 0 is division by 0. It's undefined. You have to know this. Now this is something that you should have heard about 100 times in Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and beyond. But if you're doing everything by calculator, I guess you don't have to know that because it just gives you an error. So we need to understand this. And we'll talk about it more, but you need to have this basic understanding of what division is. Okay, anyhow, we then easily evaluate this at 1/2, 1, and 2. We get these results. We plot the points on our graph. And then we sketch a graph. And we know that the closer we get to 0, the smaller is the number that we're dividing by. So the bigger our result is going to be. So these graphs are just going to continue going up. On both sides, the graph will continue going up. Now we'll talk about this in more detail. Right now we're just getting the idea. If you think 1 divided by 0 is 0, though, you're going to draw the graph. You're going to do fine up to about someplace. But you think the graph has to go through 0, 0. At some point, you're going to be tempted to turn around. You won't know exactly where to turn around, so you're probably going to turn around at whatever the last point is that you graphed. So your graph is going to look different than somebody else's graph if they graphed a different point. If they stopped at a different point while they were going up. Anyhow, this is not the graph of any important, well, there may be some important function. It is not the graph of this function. The graph of this function looks like this. And remember, as I've emphasized, the entire course is built on these functions that we're learning to evaluate now. You have to know the rules. You have to know how to do the arithmetic. It's absolutely essential. Now the graph of 2 to the x looks like this. Although if you think that 2 to the 0 is 0, it would dip down here at some undetermined point, different for different people, and you wouldn't have a unique graph. Come up here, go down here, and then start going back up here again. Okay? So you do have to know this basic arithmetic. Fortunately, there are only a few things you really have to know, and you're going to get used to them. So it shouldn't be too much trouble, but get used to them as quickly as you can.